Hello. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I am good. I am glad that we're live and that everything's working.
Perfect. Perfect. After your technologically nightmare couple of days, I'm very glad to hear that.
I'm feeling the way I think people across the world might have felt with the global outages, but at least I was home and not in an airport.
True. Very true. I'm glad everything's back together and we can finish up this sequence of conversations about this ESE report that was delivered to the Sarasota County School Board by the two experts that they commissioned to do a deep dive into ESE and the issues we have with ESE and academic achievement. So I've got some clips for you, Susan, if you want to go ahead and get started, or is there anything else you want to talk about before we go ahead and get started?
Now, I will tell you, I've been in a couple of meetings over the last week or so here locally, and I think things are gearing up for the next school year. Um, Staff are trying to learn their new roles and understand. Talking about computers, I was in a meeting this morning. They were saying like every system that they're using here locally has changed for this school year, and that I think staff are feeling a little frazzled with all the change that they don't quite understand the how and the why of it. And I only say that because that was something sort of emphasized through this report. And certainly from the conversations I've been having with people, we might still be working on that, the how and the why, and how do people individually fit into the mission and what's happening. But let's
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing that happened is school grades came out yesterday. So
Mhm.
once again, Sarasota is an A-graded district. And not that we don't want to celebrate that we're an A-graded district, but holy smokes, what are we, if they're grading like you grade in the classroom, our our numbers aren't great and it's just shocking to me. So I feel like we've got a lot of political cheerleaders running around celebrating the A-rated district while we get the phone calls from the parents with all the frustration of I've got to fill you in later. But
Yeah, we're definitely grading on a curve.
yeah, right, right.
All right, so let's hear what the school board had to say about all of this information that was provided to them.
Okay, so
It's a
to cue
long
it up.
time in coming,
Oh,
and no surprises for
sorry. I'll start over. You go ahead and say what you wanted to say.
Oh, I was just going to cue it up and say that at this time, Bridget Ziegler was still the school board chair. And so the first person she deferred to for comment was Karen Rose. And what I think you're going to hear is, and what I hear in a lot of when the politicians speak is more about what they've done and how this relates to them rather than what this report told them and any questions they might have with this report. So let's go ahead and listen to what Karen had to say and we can talk about it after.
Okay, so so I'm clear, the whole report had already been delivered to the school board, and now this is the school board members were open. It was open to their questions that they had for the presenters. Is that true?
Questions and comments.
Okay, all right.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's a long time in coming, and no surprises for me, having spent my career as a teacher for exceptional student education. I welcome this, and I think it has incredible recommendations that will give our students the academic growth that we're accountable for and support our teachers and staff. The things that I do want to point out are and these aren't, I don't have any questions because you did such a thorough job, but I do want to reinforce a few pieces, if I may.
Absolutely.
The achievement gap, I think, is paramount. I think that we, as a district, pride ourselves in at least being above the state average. And when we look at our exceptional student education students, we are not. And that isn't because of staff. And I'm glad that you've pointed that out. We have incredible teachers, principals, district staff, and huge opportunity here with these recommendations. And I think that in and of itself will have an impact on the climate and the culture. I think data is at the heart of it. One of the pieces too that you pointed out that I think is front and center is that as we go forward, I'm interested in going forward with these recommendations as one individual board member, that we're including teachers and school-based staff and principals in the frameworks, and in the engagement of this, and the belief in where we're going and supporting academic growth with our students. So I'm extraordinarily thankful and confident with the leadership that we have in superintendent and district staff to really start going places in ESE. It's long overdue, and the data piece is long overdue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Mayor.
Did you freeze, Susan?
I am not frozen on my end, but I saw that the video froze.
So I don't know. I think Karen might be head cheerleader. Maybe. Like the recommendations are going to impact the climate and the culture. Help me understand how recommendations do that if you don't take any action.
Well, and I appreciate her saying that we have great staff, and certainly we've had wonderful interaction with a number of teachers over the course of our time of working here. But I think not recognizing that the report talked about that we have a training problem, and that we have teachers that they were in classrooms and there was not instructional excellence in more classrooms than there were than what they saw, in some of the wonderful classroom is, I mean, not about people specific, but our hiring practices and our training and our continuous development of folks, and making sure they have access to curriculum and materials and they understand them. Not acknowledging that upfront really is concerning.
Right, no questions. Now, I'm frozen. The screen I'm looking at is frozen. I don't know what you're looking at, and the live stream has stopped.
Okay. I don't know, because
Are you?
the live stream for me still shows it's clicking and live.
Okay. Okay, then I just wanted to make sure.
Do you want to try to exit and come back in?
Sure.
Okay. Random Detour, are you still able to hear me out there? Can you give me a comment if you can hear this stream? So maybe we did. You can hear everything. Okay, wonderful. We'll try to get this running again in just a minute. So, this is, I think, the technology world we're all living in right now. I spent 8 hours yesterday trying to get all my programs to work and things to talk to each other. And it was just a source of frustration without a whole lot being accomplished. But Sue will be back with us hopefully quickly. She's rebooting things and trying to get back to the live show here. And technology is a beautiful thing when it works. And I will say, we might start this over when we we might have to edit this video and come back and cut out this part where I'm just sitting here chit-chatting and, waiting for Sue to get back online. I think this year in the school district is going to be a real challenge because, um, I don't know how many new software programs and computer, um, options that they brought in for staff between ESE and curriculum and security and safety. Apparently, they're having all new security and safety protocols starting with the high schools. They're going to bring magnetometers in, so that'll be interesting. Um, Hello, I just been chit chatting, and apparently we're still live because our friend Random G Tour is commenting for me to let me know he's still there and able to see.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so we may need to edit because I've just been chit chatting away while waiting for you to come back to us.
I think it's perfect. You can go
Um,
ahead and load that next video. So I hope everything that you said, I think it was so relevant, everything that you said, because here we have school board members and we talk about, first of all, she was not an ESE teacher for her entire career. She was at the district in
she,
administration.
Karen Rose.
Yeah. Yeah, but you heard what she just said. Her entire career, she was an ESE teacher.
Right.
So I just think that, again, watch what they do, not what they say. So that was one thing, and didn't ask a single question. But you'll notice as we go through this, they kind of piggyback. So somebody makes a good point, then the next guy's got to take that point and make a better point. It's more about, in my opinion, politicking throughout this than it is about really fixing any issues that have been identified. So that's just my.
Yeah, and I really would have expected with the depth of this report. I mean, it was 100 pages, that there would have been real conversation about each section of this, kind of like we just spent hours doing. And more of that for the public to see. We don't know what happened in those one-on-ones that they had with board members, but certainly I think that the public wants to see the thought processes and how we get from point A to point B.
Right.
So,
It's about sound bites. And, she talks about the achievement gap, and she admits for our ESE students, we are not above the state average for the achievement gap. I think later you'll hear Bambi saying the same thing. So instead of drilling down to figure out how will we do that and not slow as molasses, how will we do that? We've got staff that wants to do that. We've got staff that wants to make a difference for kids. We've got staff that has no idea what their job expectation is going into this year in a few short weeks. It's not a recipe set up for success, in my opinion, at this moment. But if you want to go ahead and play, Susan, the next is Robin. Now, she does talk about the one-on-ones here. So I think that's a little insight into, we've talked about some of this stuff. We aren't going to talk about it publicly. Things fell apart. We don't want to talk about that either, but we've got excellent staff. I mean, so if you want to go ahead and play that one.
okay.
Both of you, I think I've never really seen such a thorough report in all the years I've been in education. And I also really want to thank my fellow board members who, I want the community and parents and everybody to know this was a 5-0 vote that we wanted you to dig into this. And I think it makes sense for me from hearing from teachers and that what some of their frustrations were, especially pointing out the behavior. And I do think we have excellent staff from district, classroom, paraprofessionals. They need help and they've been crying. So this is a framework to where things can start. And I do have a lot of faith in our superintendent, and I look forward to our one-on-ones. because I think it's very critical as we move forward that there's a history. And we have people in this district, whether they're still working, retired, or on the board, that have a history. And where we've been, where we are, kind of what happened. Also, it shows that systems and procedures fell apart. And when those things fall apart, then we see some of the results that are in this framework. So I do appreciate it, and I think our parents and our staff will appreciate it. This was some of this was hard to hear. You try not to take some of it personal. I mean, I used to work in part of this, and you point out things, and it's difficult, but it had to come out, and we can only move forward and do great things for our students, because that's why we're here, and our staff. So thank you. I look forward to working with our superintendent and over a couple of years.
Thank you, Ms.
So it's almost like the one-on-one memo is, we're going to fix this, but we don't want the conversation to be public, and it's going to take a while to fix this. I mean, Robin was in charge of MTSS when she worked at the district. When she retired from the district, we were implementing MTSS, and the people that worked for her implementing MTSS are still at our district. And we've gone backwards in that process instead of forwards. And if she was listening to anybody and reading this report, she certainly should know how to fix this and be working with the superintendent, her only employee, to get things done for kids. She didn't need to be on this board for 2 years to have somebody else tell her things were broken, in my opinion.
Well, and so again, I'm glad to hear that she acknowledged what was in the report. I think being willing to hear that there's a problem and that we need to find solutions is always, the first step. My frustration is we need to act like our house is on fire.
Mm-hmm.
Every minute that we have broken systems, broken policies, broken whatever, that's a child whose needs aren't being met.
Mm-hmm.
In order for children to receive a free, appropriate public education has to function. It has to work. We have to know what we're doing. We have to make sure the people who are expected to deliver the education to our children know what they're doing and how to do it and why they're doing it, and have the resources to be able to make those changes as necessary. So I agree with you that she's been around education long enough that it should have been apparent. But now that we've had somebody else draw the line in the sand for us to say, here's the baseline, here's where you're starting from, here's what we know is not working, over the course of years is what I heard her say with the superintendent. And I mean, that may be about, she hopes that there's longevity with this one, that we aren't playing, musical superintendents again. But for me, I just have such a sense of urgency to get this fixed.
Well, and along with the sense of urgency comes how they're prioritizing the budget. So if we keep growing our legal budget to fight families, and we don't focus on fixing the things that have identified that are broken, that tells me school board isn't listening to what parents, and this report certainly, have been telling them, and staff that is begging them for solutions. I don't know that they've made any adjustments with helping teachers get things into classrooms. I see lots of first-year teachers on the Help a Sarasota County Teacher Out looking for funding for their classrooms in critical years, but we still cannot see a budget. They did a budget hearing this week, but if you don't see the budget, you don't know where their priorities are. So I haven't told you this, Susan. I did get an org chart. I'll say the district did take one of the recommendations up that we can talk about when we get back to another clip here, but can't get a budget in the public records, but can get an org chart.
And, I have heard this conversation with you for how long now about your request to see a budget. And this is the second administration, at least.
It
Second,
switched over when the last CFO left and this CFO came. Jane Goodwin was still on the board when they switched and didn't allow us. It was when the new attorneys came, and I have this crazy email from the attorneys about why I can't see a budget and how complicated it is.
and just so people know, who maybe don't have our years of history and working with the school district and being citizen stakeholders that really paid attention to what happened at school board meetings. It used to be back in the day before computers that every budget, it looked like a telephone book. Although we probably have people out there that don't know what a telephone book is.
It was online and it was passed out at every meeting. So every board meeting would have the financial implication of the decisions they were making, so you could see it. Now
Right.
that's all gone away.
But during the budget process every year, a book was actually produced. It was like very thick, but it had all of the numbers in it for every school, for the district's budget. It was very transparent. You could follow the dollars. You understood where money was being allocated, where money fell short. I think I know there's conversation in our community right now about the referendum and the extra millage that the school district asked for. But back when this all started, I think because the community could see where needs were and dollars weren't, it was an easier conversation to have about why does our school district need extra money? And the community said, oh my gosh, we think you need X. Our kids need whatever the priority was at the time. And we see that the money we're bringing in isn't enough to support that. And so we're willing to commit extra tax dollars to make sure our kids have whatever was prioritized at that time. It is much less transparent now.
Well, not only that, it was extra tax dollars for extra things. We wanted to fund more teacher time. We wanted to fund more guidance counselor. They never said we didn't have enough money to do the core things like teach reading, teach math.
Right.
We currently are using non-recurring dollars to do things like teach reading. It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd.
Right. Absolutely. Our core revenue that is guaranteed funding should be what is paying for the basics of what our kids need. The extra dollars should be for extra things.
So that's a perfect segue we have the one person on the board who says, I'm not an educator, I'm a businessman. So let's hear what he has to say about the report. This is Tom Edwards. He's been on the board for 4 years. He's up for re-election currently, and let's hear what he has to say.
I started by saying when I greeted Todd and Bambi this morning that I had to read the report 3 times because the information was so intense and very rich. And being a non-educator, I empathize even more with parents who sit in an IEP meeting and have these terms and these acronyms and these compliance checklists, and so how overwhelming that is for our parents and our students. So I do have a couple of questions. I know that when we met, we talked a little bit about financial creep that had happened between a school-based job and was it a grant funded position and then and those kinds of things. Is that part of what ended up in the movement of money from the general fund? I'd like to try and identify that because I'm more on the business side of things and to try and figure out how we can look at those numbers coming from the general fund?
Well, and it's an excellent question. So first of all, I want to say that we did not do a full financial audit. We looked at the budget, we looked at the numbers to make some determinations and some recommendations. So please understand, this is not a full financial audit. But when we look at that and we look at the changes in staffing over time, it appears to us that many of those dollars that are coming out of the general education fund are in fact going for staff and going for increased staffing. That's important, right? We're not suggesting that we don't need some of those staff members, but what we want to do is we want to look at where we're utilizing that and do we need all of those resources in place. Let me
Sue, are you still there?
I am.
Okay. Was that the end?
That was the end.
Okay.
So what was shocking to me about that was, first of all, we never asked them to do a full financial audit. We have auditors that do full financial audits, but what they did do was look and show us an alarming chart of over $1 million extra each year that the district is using in addition to the previous year to fund ESE something. We don't know what. What he just said was staff. Now, if you know you need staff to fund services that are probably contractually obligated in the student's IEP or people or whatever you're funding, classrooms, we don't know because he didn't do a deep dive, although they told us in the beginning they would. They told us in the beginning if they saw things, they would go back and they had no problem asking for more questions. And we saw the detail that they asked for of the things that they should have received from the district. So I thought that answer was a little bit of a cop-out. What do you think, Susan?
Well, first of all, I thought it was interesting that they were able to get a budget.
Yeah, that's true.
So, because again, I would really like to see what did they look at to come to their conclusions.
Well, you may have forgotten, but we did a public records request.
I didn't forget,
Okay.
but we don't have the information.
No, we got a couple pieces of stupid stuff.
So my point is, we have not examined. You and I, but I think we're representative of community stakeholders. We asked for the information. We didn't get information that would have allowed us to come to the conclusion that they came to
Right.
about this extra money that was shifted and what it was used for and why did it happen. And they weren't able to answer that question.
Right, but we certainly know what was given to them was far more responsive than what was given to us for the same request, because they couldn't have come to any conclusions if the district had done that. But and what's the alternative? If you don't get a public records request, the alternative is sue them
Right.
to get it. You know, that's really the next answer. So it's interesting to me when I talk to people and they're like, "Oh, I got this public record request." I thought, interesting. Is it selective? Is it weaponized? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't understand. I feel like if you want, one of the themes of this report was the need to build trust in the community. And the way that they recommended building trust was through transparency and accountability and making sure people understood the why and the how of things. And,
Right.
So I that was like an overriding theme through every section that we looked at. I don't think we're quite there yet.
We are not there. We are not there. And Random Detour, we agree. He just made a great case. And I don't remember how he voted for recording IEP meetings, but
Tom Edwards.
Tom Edwards made a great case for recording IEP meetings. I don't remember how he voted because, again, recording IEP meetings was something we were always able to do in Sarasota until we weren't. And it was coincided with, as Random Detour will remember, prevailing in our lawsuit that we were forced to place against the district, but we didn't use a single recording in that lawsuit, not a
Nope.
single one. So why they thought taking away recording IEPs was helpful, but it's good to hear that he now thinks it's important, and a lot of things happen in IEP meetings that are difficult for parents to understand.
Well, if he had to read this report 3 times to understand it,
Mhm,
and it wasn't about his child, you know what I mean?
mhm.
Not that reading what is wrong in your district that you have been elected to run, to make sure that it's functioning. I'm sure there is an emotional component, I would hope, for board members to understand we have things that are not running well, but it is no comparison to a parent sitting at a table full of experts telling them what's wrong with their child.
That's right.
And so that emotional component beyond the jargon and the language and the contractual details that you have to work out in an IEP meeting, I think a minimum standard should be that you can record it so you can go back and listen to it later, maybe
Right.
3 times if you need to.
Right. And we do have that now. So parents, just remember, send them an email to whoever you communicate with for this next school year, and 48 hours in advance, and just let them know, and bring your cell phone and record the meeting.
And it's not available in every county in Florida, and it is not available in every state in the country. So no, Sarasota County School Board members, when that vote came before them, made the right choice of allowing it to continue. It was a practice for years in Sarasota. They codified it into policy, and we celebrate that that's what they did. It was the right thing to do for families.
Yep. Yep. So the next
Okay.
person, right? So we go from Tom to Bridget. Now,
Bridget Ziegler, she's the chair.
she is. So Tim Enos was not at this meeting. So they've gone around the table once, and now Bridget is going to weigh in with her thoughts on this report.
Okay, well, let's see what.
But I'm also glad you mentioned the compliance piece, because again, I think a lot of some of this is reaction to what's happened in the past, and I understand that. But I think we've heard my colleagues say this before. But compliance is it's an expectation. Like, we have to do that, right? So that's not. And yes, it's good to have someone over to help with the paperwork and dotting I's, crossing T's, 100%. But elevating the academic focus was just a breath of fresh air to read that from your takeaway. And I know some of my colleagues, I think all of us would agree with that. Did you have something to say? I just saw you're leaning over. Okay,
I'm just reinforcing what you're saying.
So,
We definitely believe that the compliance has to be the foundation, no doubt about it. But we have to go beyond that. It's about moving academic achievement. And if we can move academic achievement from a state level, then we should be able to do it from a district level.
absolutely. Well, and then one other piece that I think was really important, and I would be remiss if I didn't highlight it, but really appreciate your statement about the unique and challenge that Oak Park is. I mean, it is a truly unique, and we're very fortunate to have this option here. But it is not. It's geared very for a very specific kind of student, although that ranges. And I think that many of the amazing people who work there have been that I don't know that they feel that people recognize that. So I think it's really amazing that you did, because I know you guys saw it right off the bat, and I wanted to reiterate that. I know my colleagues here have mentioned it many times as well. So I just really appreciate you highlighting that. My final statement would be, and the last piece, really, the real last piece is, and it's not so much a question, but I'm glad you highlighted it, because it's like, this is amazing, and now it's on us to execute. Well, really, you. And then, but you mentioned something, and there's so many times when we have a consultant come in and do work. The financial piece, really glad you highlighted that. I think that's something we do need to look into. We have, whether that's for our audit committee or after the superintendent kind of provides us additional information. But using a third party to help us implement, so that we really hold ourselves accountable. And I've recognized that we don't have a money tree, but when it comes to the investment, there are so many ways in which I think there's a proactive approaches that will pay dividends in the end, not only just financially, but also in our student achievement, which is what we're here for. So I would reinforce the need to have that as we move forward.
All right. Well, you sit on the audit committee. Is that true?
That is true.
And so tell us, what did you learn? This was held in November of 2023.
Mhm.
And so tell us, what has the audit committee done to look into this?
Well, absolutely nothing. In fact, you can't get an audit committee meeting. It's
Oh,
very, 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 very difficult. We have a new chair, the new chair of the audit committee. The audit committee consists of each school board member gets to select a person to sit on the audit committee. And then there's school district staff that are supposed to be resources to us, like the CFO. And then there's a school board member that leads the audit committee, which recently they put Tim Enos in charge to be the leadership. It was previously Jane Goodwin prior to that. And I think we just need a whole conversation about the audit committee, Susan, because it's almost unbelievable what's transpired with the audit committee. And we had
but
one
the
meeting in
bottom,
March.
but the bottom line is, for this particular subject, it is not a topic that has come to your committee to delve into.
Nope. In fact, I've been emailing staff asking for a meeting and told we can have a meeting in September. And we're going to discuss a construction contract that's been out there for a very long time that we should have discussed last February. It's slow as molasses, and it's just ridiculous.
But it's just important to know that, this report, again, was delivered November of 2023. It is now July of 2024. We're talking $1 million per year transferred to ESE over the last 4 years, an additional $1 million each year. And not a clear understanding of why those additional dollars were needed, even by the board members who are responsible for approving a budget.
So random detail, wouldn't the audit committee have access to the budget? One would think so. One would think so. And in other districts in Florida, they do, but it's just not a priority in this district. It's more smoke and mirrors. And then to follow up on Susan's point, last week, there was an arrest of 2 ESE teachers in Sarasota County that were delivering services to the most vulnerable hospital homebound students, and also students that are incarcerated, ESE students that are incarcerated. And so there's lots of issues and concern that could be addressed. I mean, how does that happen? How do you deliver services for years to students and pay people to do that and not have checks and balances in place?
And I have to tell you, this one's near and dear to my heart, because back in 2015, we had to file a federal complaint because our youth who were incarcerated, and just so people know, these are kids who were charged with a crime. They're minors that were charged as an adult, but have not been adjudicated. So they're sitting in jail awaiting to find out, are they innocent? Are they guilty? Are they going to jail? But they're being held in the county jail, and they're entitled to continue to receive their education. And the way that Sarasota County chose to do that was by contracting with teachers to go to the jail to provide those services. And we don't know how it will turn out. Again, everybody is innocent until found guilty, but 2 of our ESE teachers were charged with grand theft, or grand larceny.
Fraud. One was fraud. Yeah, that's also another it was
Right, but your point is that because the checks and balances are missing, and the oversight to make sure the dollars we're spending on ESC services are being delivered, it's a really black and white example of a very vulnerable population not being served appropriately, because obviously the processes were not correct.
Right. And I do have some questions that the sheriff had given information for years with one of these teachers of services that were not delivered. And every benefit of the doubt was given to figure out what they came up with as far as a monetary finding for what the charge was. And by that, I mean, one of the teachers that was charged works, well, they both work at district schools during the day. But one of the charges for one of the teachers was she was claiming that she was allegedly um, working at the jail while she would have otherwise still been at the district school. So how can you be in two places at once? And why the heck are we paying for that for years? Not only are we paying for that, why aren't we digging in to find out what services weren't delivered to these students? So
And I question, are we? Like, what are we doing for the kids that we now know probably weren't getting what they deserved? Who's
Susan, you
looking
know
at
that
that?
answer. You know that
Well,
answer.
I mean, I can guess that answer, but I would actually like to know that answer.
Yeah.
So anyway, we could talk about this, you're right, for an hour, all in its own topic.
Yeah.
But I think it's so poignant a moment as we look at this because it's such a clear example of why what is being recommended in this report is such a minimum place to start and how impactful not doing these things are to our children.
Right. So, and then the other thing Bridget did mention was having a third party. She thought it was important to have a third party look at this to figure out, are we implementing it? What does it look like? So at least she acknowledges the fact that if we don't, nothing's going to change. She didn't say
Yes.
that, but that's why you would need the third party to implement this.
And we aren't sure of the answer to that, whether it happened or not, correct? As far as we know, the third party has not been engaged.
Correct. Well, we haven't seen it on an agenda.
Right.
So we would have. So then after Bridget, then it goes back to Robin. So the next clip is Robin. She had further information to share related to after everybody's.
I know we can't make those decisions, we have to, our superintendent, but I don't want to see this just get put on a shelf, which happens so many times when we have these kind of, we've never had one like this, but in other areas. And so I really look forward to having those conversations to have you come back and come back and come back. But I also want people to realize too, and for us as a board to think about it, because you brought it up. And I don't think most people realize how close student services and the ESE work together. And I think we need to have a look at how the whole student services is going to, how it's aligned, and how is it going to align with this? Sure. Because MTSS is a huge process, and it happens at the school level. And you already talked, you hit about the resources. So many things fall on the school counselor. So that all has to be looked at of when you have compliance, because we haven't even talked about 504, which is a huge compliance. Mm-hmm. And this district has many, many people, students on 504. So I almost think we need to do something like this for student services, because we are going to capture a whole bunch of students that need help.
Can somebody please tell Robin Marinelli she's in charge? The school board member is in charge of the superintendent. Did you hear her start with, well, we can't make these decisions? Like, yes, Robin, that's why people elected you. People elected you to be a leader.
And I agree with you. It is interesting to me that 504 was a topic that kind of didn't, it doesn't fall under the ESE department, because for people out there listening who don't know what 504 means, it is a separate federal law that guarantees that people with disabilities will have access, that we can level the playing field for them by providing accommodations in a public setting, in like a school setting. And it's also, it covers people in employment settings. It's not unique to education. But in Sarasota County, that falls under the Student Services Department instead of the Exceptional Student Education Department, although both departments serve children with disabilities. And so this report did not really go into anything other than student services and ESE are connected. But Robin, at the beginning of this, talked about the boondoggle of 504s and the burden that it places on guidance counselors.
When she voted to have them engage for $150,000 no bid contract with them, she said, I'm glad we're going to dig into the boondoggle of the 504s. And then now she's acting like it's just okay that we didn't. So the scope of work that was presented is not the scope of work that was delivered.
Well, and who knows, I mean, what was the scope of work of the contract? You know, there's the conversation, the contract, and the deliverable. But it is, to your point, I think it's what the school board members say should be reflective of the action that they take. And so as the community, we were led to believe that we would be looking at 504, but yet that wasn't included in the scope of work that was the deliverable.
But they did say their recommendation was to put it back to how it was 20 years ago or 10 years, not even. It was, they changed it under this school board. Tom Edwards, Bridget Ziegler, Karen Rose were on the school board when they voted to separate those two departments and elevate somebody as an executive director. So we used to have two directors and one executive director. Now the recommendation was add a chief and bring these departments back together. Well, they did that, but now we have two executive directors and a chief. So we've added layers is what we've done. And that was one of the concerns that Bridget said was, are we adding layers or are we adding people in the classroom? And you'll see in the next clip, Karen Rose discusses that a bit also. But the good news is we did a records request for the organizational chart as it stands going into the 24-25 school year. And they did reconnect those two departments under an executive director who last year was a principal at one of the elementary schools. And now he is an executive director over both of those two departments.
Is he an executive director or a chief?
You're right, he's a chief. And the two executive directors are someone who was a director last year under the executive director that retired. She got promoted. And then the executive director that got promoted a couple years ago remains an executive director over student services.
And so student services and ESE, two executive directors that report to now a chief, who then reports to the assistant superintendent in charge, the academic officer, right? The chief academic officer.
Another new layer we have, yes, with the chief academic officer. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So one would hope, and I know people feel different ways. Some people are like, why are we putting all these layers of leadership and not putting dollars in classrooms? And I'm like, if we need layers of leadership in order to right the ship, then the ship needs to be righted. You know what I mean? Like, what are they doing? How is it trickling down to the classroom? Does it mean that the classroom teachers are getting the resources and the support and the training and the help that they need to deliver services? Because and I don't know the answer to that question, but to me, it's the only reason to add layers of leadership.
Yeah, I mean, without saying a strategic plan, we've got less enrollment, if not the same. The best case is we've got the same enrollment as we had many years ago. We're stagnant. So if you've got the same number of kids you've got to educate and you're doing a poorer job of educating them, although we went up a couple percentage points in one area last year, it certainly isn't a model that we can replicate if we don't put all these other pieces in place. So I think it remains to be seen if this plan is going to work. But our school board believes in the leader because they've given him a 5-year contract.
So I think what's going to be important is we do not have, although we've got school grades and we know what academic improvement was for one grade level, we don't have those reports yet for ESE kids publicly.
Right. I mean, in private sector, when you hire people, you give them benchmarks and objectives. And I think the jury's out. Random detour, each added administrator level directly takes dollars intended for delivery and instruction to the students. I agree with you. And the fact that we've got teachers still begging for money is shocking to me, with a $1.8 billion budget without increased enrollment. I don't understand it. But the next clip, Susan, I think Karen gives her opinion about adding administrators.
I'm not a proponent of adding administrators. I spent my life as a teacher, and let's add the teachers. I think that, from my individual perspective, we've got to add administrative high-level oversight. Our district has grown tremendously. We obviously have a systems challenge, a framework challenge, a consistency, all of which you have pointed out, and we can better adapt the resources that we have. I'm extraordinarily excited, and I don't look at any of this, and it's my final statement, as a negative. I look at it as what we as a district have taught our students as productive failure. Everything that we can do better is going to grow success. So I thank you for this report from the bottom of my heart. I thank you.
Susan, what does productive failure mean?
A lesson we should learn from, maybe. But what's scary to me in productive failure is, what kids did we fail? I mean, frankly, if you're making widgets and you have a productive failure, it means that one of your widgets, has an air bubble in it that doesn't belong there, or you have a piece of steel that maybe didn't cut exactly right, which is no big deal on the production line, except if it is the Francis Scott Key Bridge. Then productive failure becomes a very big deal. And so we're talking about human lives that are impacted when our system fails. And what anybody that doesn't know what that means for individual children, and unfortunately we've seen this, is they cut class. They become a behavior problem. They drop out of school. They try to kill themselves. It has, and it brings tears to my eyes, because we have worked with those families whose children have become the productive failure. And school board members and administrators are responsible for preventing that. And it's not that we're humans. We're always going to have people who have challenges that are hard to meet. But at the levels and the numbers of kids who are not successful in this school district that has an A rating is terrifying.
I agree with you. And the other thing that it actually infuriates me, because Karen Rose sits in these meetings and she knows our district hasn't grown. She knows we're losing students next year, but she just told you our district has grown tremendously. The only thing growing is our high-level staff that we're paying, and she's approving at every board meeting more big salaries to high-level staff. So how she stands up, it's kind of watch what they do and not what they say. What she's saying is she's telling people we've grown as a district. It's just not true. It is simply not true. How do we build trust when they keep lying to us?
I wish I had that magic answer.
Wave the wand. The sad part is it works. People
Well,
believe it.
feed people misinformation, and too many people listen to the sound bites.
That's right. That's right. So I think the next clip, out of all these clips, I have to say, I think Tom Edwards asks the right question. I will tell you though, I've heard him ask the right question often. He's a good speaker. He asks the right question. Where he falls short, in my opinion, is the follow through, because he too doesn't get the answers before he votes for the next high level staff. And kudos to wonderful staff. So it's not just one person or one party. It's everybody who says something that they want people to hear and believe, and there isn't follow through before action is taken.
And I've seen other school boards operate where they almost keep like a running list of topics.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if we've talked about it at the last, 3 meetings or 3 meetings ago, there's a follow-up scheduled on topics that have come before them, so that they don't just like appear and then go away and fall through the cracks. And I'm not sure that I see that in the way this board operates.
Well, it's not even this board. It hasn't operated that way in Sarasota County the entire time we've been paying attention. So other school districts would say, I'd like a report from staff on this answer. Like, for instance, what Mr. Edwards going to ask in a minute here. And they get it at the next school board meeting. Somebody says, here's what you've asked for, and here's what we'd like to deliver. So it's intentional, and it's by design, and it's politicking.
Yeah. And I don't know. I would like to see a functional school board that the public could easily follow. What are the outstanding issues that the school board is following, and what conclusions do they come to? But you're right. For years, we've watched them talk about this, that, or the other, and then they're on to the next thing, and we never resolve the first.
And they even admit it by saying, we get these reports and then they go to the shelf.
Yeah.
I mean, they all know it. Nobody's doing anything to change it. So it's just extremely disingenuous when you hear how they want to move the needle. And what we get is a revamped website, and we don't have the stuff on it that matters, but we got a lot of pieces of paper that you can't follow and don't mean anything.
And a lot of marketing materials.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
How
All
much
right.
time
So
is spent with that? I think that,
do you want to hear what Tom has to say?
except that's not Tom. This one's Tom.
No, I was getting him.
Oh.
I can't load it until we're done talking.
And that's why I brought it up. One of the things that might be helpful for all of us is to take the prioritization and recommendation pages and add the costs associated, which I think, if you had to fill that org chart and all those positions, and just so that we had, and we know it's an approximation, because I know that there's challenges about adding to administrators. We always have that conversation. And when I think about, we just went through a program, for example, where I think we as board members were given 4 or 5 options around what we could do with behaviors. And I think how much time and effort the administrators and people that should have been boots on the ground in the classrooms doing systems and procedures and all the things that we moved them over to look at all what those options are. And now, what are those costs? Where are those hours? And how do we economize that? I think one of the obvious things that you pointed out is that we have ESE liaisons in every school, 1 per every school, and they're all doing compliance. If we unbundle the compliance piece and have compliance liaisons, then do we really need ESE liaisons at every school if there's compliance people? There's ways to leverage everyone to their highest values if we're getting those hours back and we're dedicating to the systems and procedures and data that you point out. Because I asked Mr. Connor every time I'm sure 3 or 4 times in our one-on-one. Well, if you're going to do that, what's the benchmark where we're starting and where are you hoping to end up? And I get the same answer. I'm working on that right now.
Now, that's just not even funny. If you have a CEO and you're making decisions and you're saying, this is what we're going to do, and your board says, what's the benchmark? And the answer is, I'm working on that, but they laugh. If you don't know what the benchmark is and what the outcomes are supposed to be, how are you making decisions?
Now, to be fair, he was about 90 days into his tenure when this conversation was happening. But here we are in July. Hopefully they have that information. But to our earlier point, it's not one that I've seen circle back in front of the public.
Well, and Trump's been on the board 4 years.
Right.
He's been through a superintendent or two. He should know what's going on with ESE. He was through a lawsuit. He was through a state audit. What he just said about maybe not needing ESE liaisons at every school, what we know the ESE liaisons do and how stretched we know they are, tells me Tom's out of touch. He talks a good game, but I understand what his point he was trying to make was, how do we leverage better opportunities for employees to deliver better outcomes for students, but the example was a poor example.
Right. And I agree there needed to be some shift in what we asked liaisons to do. But you're right. I mean, I can't imagine not having one at every school, or maybe more than one, depending on the size of the school.
Well, and they did take the recommendation to have compliance liaisons, although it really doesn't make any sense what the compliance liaisons, well, it's not clear what they will be doing this year or how they will be doing it. But I will say, sitting through the court hearing of the DJ case, one of the ESE liaisons that was in that case that played a monumental piece of what transpired with that student is now being promoted to a compliance liaison. And we know there hasn't been training, and we know that person didn't understand what should have occurred with that one student and others that we know about since that time. But they're getting promoted. It's the playbook here in Sarasota County.
And I have heard that these compliance liaisons are going to have about 10 schools each that they support. And I had somebody say to me today, well, I guess we get 10% of their time. So, it will just be interesting. I don't know exactly what job they're going to do in compliance.
And who's going to really write the IEPs, and who's going to be the LEA in the meetings? It's also unknown that it doesn't build trust.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know, there's some big institute happening next week for employees. It will be interesting to see if people walk out of that with any clearer understanding of how this is intended to work and what their role is in that. Because certainly from the people we're talking to, there's a lot of uncertainty when we're, a couple of weeks from the start of the school year. And that was one of the points in this report, is how we're always behind in our planning and how unsettling that is for our ESE students in particular.
So Random Detour wants to know the timeline for the third-party implementation. We haven't heard. We haven't even heard if they're engaging anybody to do any third-party implementation. To our knowledge, it's not occurring. But we could listen to what Terry has to say. He concludes the superintendent is the next speaker.
Right. And I will say at the end of the report, if you go look at it, the third party did have an implementation timeline. That's what Mr. Edwards was holding up in the last clip. And some of the recommendations were 6 months, some were a year, some were 2 years out. But it is not clear which of these the board has adopted, and if they agreed with this timeline, and if they've decided to hire a third party to actually help with the progress monitoring. So
And never have we publicly associated dollars with any of the recommendations that Mr. Edwards just said he wanted to see. But here we are starting school.
So let's get to the superintendent and hear his piece.
Sometimes this is a vulnerable thing to do, right? When you have a review or so a third party comes in. And I just want to thank our staff who really took on the challenge and opened up, and we're very transparent and we're vulnerable, because when you highlight certain things, you can take that very personally, right? We dedicate our lives, our educators dedicate their lives to this work. And I'm just thankful that we have such a high quality staff here. This is not a people problem. This is a process and systems issue that I think is going has been a beautiful roadmap, and it starts with transparency, right? So we have to start and we have to show where the warts are and where we need to work. And so the road to accountability is through transparency, and this is a perfect start. And so now you've given me a gift as a new superintendent, because I come in alongside of my transition plan and I'm evaluating every aspect of this organization. And you really got deep with this, and this has been very helpful for me. And I will tell you to just to reaffirm what's been said with our board members, this will live within the strategic plan.
Yep.
So it will not go away. You will see verbatim many of the recommendations built in to our refreshed strategic plan.
Except we don't see the strategic plan.
So to be clear, out on the website, there is again, what I call a marketing piece that is what he wants the public to know are the topics in the strategic plan, but it doesn't get to the nitty gritty.
Well, and the road to accountability is transparency. I would believe that if when we did a public records request for what they gave these people to view to form the basis of their opinion, if that public records request had been fulfilled, I would believe a little bit more. But absent that, which we certainly didn't get, I don't believe. I mean, I believe the road to accountability is transparency. I just don't believe that is the tone of the leadership we have currently at the
We're
school
on a
board.
different road.
Yeah, we're on a different road. It just is so, it's so frustrating, because I listen to all these people politicking for this party or that party, and we've had all kinds of parties here at leadership at the school board level, and it seems that once they get elected, they just all become cheerleaders, and the same things occur. The ship is
doesn't
going
get steered in a different direction.
No, and the staff that we know feel the same way. I mean, how often do people call us because they can't say what they wanted to say in a meeting, and they send parents to us to get help? You know, it's not the way a school district should run if you really believe every child every day, except for those that are in jail or on hospital homebound, or
Need anything that's unique, or
mhm.
maybe have a behavioral component, or their families are struggling, or
And had they followed some of the very simple recommendations that Dr. Lockman and Todd, I can't remember his last name,
Mr. Zellick.
Had they followed some very basic recommendations, we would not have had some of the problems we've encountered during extended school year this summer. And also, we see going into this school year that is starting. Parents, I just talked to 2 parents this morning that are going to homeschool their children because they can't get answers and they do not feel comfortable and they're not being responded to. That's not promoting our public schools and what we offer in Sarasota County with what we know could be happening with the same number of students and an enormous budget.
So I will say that I am very glad that they contracted to have this report compiled.
Mhm.
I feel like identifying what isn't working is truly necessary in order to solve some of the systemic problems we've seen year after year after year. Um, but I still feel wholeheartedly that unless they are willing to bring in somebody to help with the oversight, to make sure there is follow through and to help with problem solving, because I think when you're in the midst of it, sometimes you can't see the forest through the trees. You know what I mean? Like you've always done something a certain way, and even though it may not be productive, like it's not getting you to the result that you want, I think sometimes when you're in the day to day of it, it's hard to see how to make the corrections. But when you have somebody else who is helping you to analyze and evaluate and problem solve and be held accountable to that, it allows the process to be refined. And this is a big shift to change course, and to get everybody rowing together in order to change that course. And so, I mean, that's why having leadership that all understands the mission and the vision and that the resources are aligned to what we're trying to accomplish. And then we periodically evaluate, are we moving in the right direction or do we need to correct course again?
But Susan, some of the things are very basic. I mean, without curriculum and without teaching the teachers how what they've got available to them, absolutely nothing changes.
I
And that's
I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying from an accountability standpoint,
right.
their recommendation of, "We don't want this to sit on a shelf,"
Well,
and
if
we
they
want
mean it, they a couple of them have said it. Let's see if they mean it because we can't do any of this without the superintendent. Somebody needs to tap them all on the shoulder and let them know, Mr. Edwards, if you're going to ask for dollars to be associated with recommendations, that should be a public document, and we should all be discussing that at a workshop or at a board meeting. Miss Marinelli, if you don't want it to sit on the shelf, don't let it sit on the shelf. It's almost like they do this game all the time, and it's what they say out loud is what they want people to believe. Tim Enos, when he was campaigning, he has a finance undergrad from UF, I think. One of his campaign sound bites was, when I get on that school board, the complete budget is going to be out at that website. The complete budget down to the school level. Again, I can't emphasize enough that until the community gets involved and until the community starts using critical thinking skills and works together to hold them accountable for what they say they're going to do, it's just going to be more of the same. And Sarasota County, in my opinion, regardless of who's sitting up there at the school board meetings and whatever kind of rallies and noises are happening in the boardroom. But yes, I believe this. I agree with you. This report was a great start. And at least we've got problems identified. And now let's see what they're going to do with those issues that have been identified.
and hopefully they will make some positive changes because it's impacting our kids every
Mhm.
day. Every student every day. Well, every student every day who isn't being educated, I know what that end result looks like.
Yep.
And it isn't productive failure. It's
No.
just failure.
Now I'll say amen.
Well,
Yep.
thank you for pulling those clips together, and I hope this was useful. That to help the community really go through these issues in a deeper dive than was done publicly by the school board. And we would love to hear comments, what people think. Our perspective is from a long time of our own children going through the ESE system, and from working with hundreds of families over a couple of decades of this system, and watching what has worked over the years and what we have seen fail over and over and over again. If we could make genuine change that benefits our kids, it also benefits our community, because then our kids are better prepared to be productive citizens. And, you know, I once saw a statistic that said for every $7 you spend, or every dollar you spend on prevention, you save $7 on the other end of having to solve a problem that was created because you didn't get it right the first time. And so if we can make sure that our children have the skills that they need when they're exiting our school system, it benefits everybody who's a taxpayer.
Well said. Well said.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Hope you guys have a great weekend, and we'll see you Tuesday with another great topic.
Thanks. Bye-bye.